Hi, it's Christine Madera from modernmystic.net and Conversations from the Edge podcast. So today's we're going to talk about self-reflection because this week's Mystic Wisdom was about self-reflection and the self that you actually reflect on when you are in self-reflection. So the human brain loves patterns, and it works by being efficient and creating lots and lots of patterns for you to live by so that you don't overheat your brain, because it only operates at about 20 watts of electricity, and more than that you'd start frying your own brain cells. So it has to be, take shortcuts and be very efficient. One of the ways it does that is through lots and lots of patterns, and those patterns of thought, of emotion, of judgments, of all kinds of things become this kind of familiar matrix. And we look to that familiar matrix for our identity. So even though there's tons of different things within that matrix that make up identity, we have this really interesting, I don't even know what they call it, some kind of brain smoother over. And in the same way that your vision system takes everything that you see and creates this panorama of it so that it feels like you have this, this view of things that's very seamless. You have this blind spot over on the outside of your eye vision, and everything outside of what you're looking directly at is blurry. Part of your peripheral vision is blurry, but your brain gives you this impression, this seamless experience of a visual panorama, even though it is actually fundamentally an illusion. So what I call the sense of self, or our other sixth sense, is really the same kind of thing, that we have this sense of self that takes all of the things in this familiar matrix of identity, smooths them all out, brings to the surface what we need to be focused on in that self-reflective way in the moment, and gives us this fluid sense of self-identity, of being the same within this larger matrix of things that could be part of this sameness, because everything shifts all the time. So what we bring to our life, how we experience ourselves in our life, and who we experience ourselves to be in each moment really is different, but we have this illusion of sameness in this sense of self. So when we are self-reflective, though, we go back into this matrix and look in this matrix for various kinds of evidence to support whatever it is that we're investigating about ourselves. So if we're in one kind of mood, we might find some kind of evidence. Like if I'm feeling really bad about myself and I want evidence about, being a great person, I'm not probably looking for the things that make me, feel really good about myself. I'm looking to those things that are like, no, I'm missing the mark. I'm missing the mark. I'm missing the mark. And so if I was in a different mood, though, if I felt really good in the moment and I'm looking for ways to feel really good, I'm going to point to those wins that I've had in my life and say, yeah, I'm doing all right. So that experience of self and the evidence we bring to the surface changes moment to moment as well. It's not just this single entity sense of self within. And so when we look at that, when we self-reflect, when we look to reflect on ourselves to find evidence of something, or to find some aspect of ourselves that we're doing well, we're not doing well, we need to do better, all of these things, we look to that whole conditioned self for this kind of evidence. So the problem with that is that all of this is learned. None of this is actually you from that foundational sense. And so when you want to experience your true self, you who you actually are, you only really find in the present moment, free from that self-reflective experience of looking for evidence of who you are, of trying to identify this person and then live that in the world. Because who we truly are is not this conditioned self. It is all that we bring to the moment, free from conditioning. So if I'm operating from my conditioned self, if something happens in the moment, my brain, because this is what brains do, it filters through all of the things that I've learned how to respond in that moment, and I bring that response to the moment. If I'm really operating from my true self, away from this kind of illusion of self, I'm actually open in that moment, free from free from the thoughts, from my opinions, my judgments, all the things I've learned who I'm supposed to be, who I've learned who I am, that I can point to and identify and say, yes, that is me. And I'm just that fresh being in the moment, dropping into that kind of quiet space and allowing that part of me to flow through and to flow forward and to respond in that moment. Now, that is the true self. But the problem with this is thought. So our minds love to think. That's what brains do. They like to think. So if we're not thinking about something that's happening in the world, we're usually reflecting or thinking about something in ourselves. And that's we get this habit of self-reflective thought. But the problem is with this is that in this fresh present moment, there's nothing to reflect on. Like you can look back and see what happened, but each present moment, like each moment, you can be fresh as your true self in that moment, but you can't reflect on that. Now that drives the thinking mind crazy because it likes to stay busy. So it will obsess sometimes about like, who am I in that present moment? It felt so good to like show up as my authentic self, to be me in the moment, to like be free from all of my rules, to be free from all of my ideas and thoughts. And I show up and then who am I in that moment? And I try, like reflective thought tries to define that, to codify that, to bring that to the surface, to turn it into the sense of self. But it doesn't work that way. It can't actually operate from that conditioned self because it's your unconditioned, fresh self coming to the surface. Now, this drives thought crazy. It drives the brain crazy because the brain likes to know things. It likes things to be certain. It likes to point to something and say, that is it, that is me. And you can't with this true sense of self because it can only be experienced in the present moment. It can only be experienced in the space between thoughts. So when you're actually thinking about something, you are out of that moment. If it's that kind of self-reflective thought. Now, if you're thinking about, an invention or balancing your checkbook or something like that, that can be non-reflective thought. But most repetitive thought is reflective thought. And most of our thought, like 95 to 98% of people's thought is this self-reflective repetitive thought. So there's a lot of time that we could be fresh in this experience of the truth of who we are without being in that regurgitating of our conditioned self. So when you let go of that illusion of self as self, like when you really wake up to who you are at that true level, you have this whole different experience of you. And you are able then to bring whatever it is that you need to this experience without having to look to the past, look to your conditioned self, look to who you've learned to be, because you have this really deep innate intelligence within you that when you are quiet internally and you allow yourself to show up in that present moment as the truth of you, all of that information, that awareness, that deeper you is available for you in that moment. And really, when you become quiet and you're really in this moment and navigating this moment, not only will it begin to give you signals about what to do, how to respond, where to go, other information you can't get from your conditioned self because it only looks to the past, to what it's learned, to what it knows. But it actually becomes a way to truly sink into your deep, deep, authentic truth, your deep, deep, authentic self, and to live from that truth of you. So I invite you to give it a try. If you notice when you are in that self-reflection, when you're thinking about, who am I in this moment? Or you've got this reactive things telling you what to do in that moment, take a breath, drop into your body, quiet the mind as best you can, and just begin to be in that state of non-self-reflection and being in the state of the truth of who you are in that moment, free from everything that you've learned to be. It takes some practice, but I swear to you, if you continue to do this, even in try it in the easy moments, then you can do them in the hard moments, but it will totally and completely change your life. All right. I'll see you on the podcast, conversationsfromtheedge.net, or you can find more mystic wisdom at modernmystic.net. Have a beautiful day.